Today we are going to expand our conversation, take them a bit out of order, tackling numbers 3 and 8, which has to do with conflict of interest, avoiding conflict of interest and the appearance of conflict, and appropriate use of the various university programs and assets that we have. And so that is our purpose this morning. We're not going to have enough time to go into all of these topics in great detail today. This will be a kind of a broad brush treatment, but it will introduce you to the topics and the ideas related to them and provide resources for you to do more research and get information on your own. And there are many resources here at the university. You probably, as you came in, saw the small card with some website information about various offices. If you didn't pick one up, please do on the way out. But you'll hear a bit more about these as we go forward. We will also allot some time at the end, your schedule permitting, to ask questions of our panelists so that if there are particular issues or questions about things that go on in your professional world that you're not quite sure about, how to sort them out, we can direct you to resources, or perhaps if it's a reasonably straightforward question, we might be able to answer it completely here. We have 4 speakers today. I'll introduce, rather than introduce all 4 right now, I'm going to introduce the first and have him speak, and then I'll come back, and you'll have to hear from me a couple of times as we go through this, as I introduce our colleagues. And first off, we're very pleased to have Michael Lord with us today. He currently serves as the Executive Director of the State Ethics Commission. Previously, he served as Assistant Attorney General for the Office of the State Treasurer. Mike is going to share with us a rather abbreviated version of the, as I understand it, the State Ethics Training module, with focus on abiding by the conflict of interest statute for the state of Maryland. So, Mike, welcome to the university.
Thank you, Rob. I am delighted to be here today, and it's a great opportunity. As Rob indicated, this will be an abbreviated presentation. Our standard ethics training for state employees is 2 hours, and we thought maybe that would be a bit lengthy for you today, so we're going to keep it a little shorter. I'm going to talk briefly about the public ethics law, which is found in Title 15 of the state government article. That's the law that forms the basis for what we do in at the Ethics Commission, and basically grew out of the Watergate era. The law was passed in 1979, and legislators realized, based on problems in recent past at that time, it might be a good idea to create and put on the books some sort of code of conduct and behavior so that state employees, which we are, as well as elected officials, such as members of the General Assembly. Okay, I'm being told to speak up, Gloria? Okay, thank you. We'll know what the rules are, create a set of rules, code of conduct, and that's what the public ethics law does. Basically, as the slide indicates, we have a representative government. Our system depends on those electing officials or those who are paying the tab for us state officials, believing and trusting that we're doing things for the right reasons and we're not doing things subject to improper influence. And as a consequence, we have a public ethics law that, as I said, governs us all. Now, today's goals, again, as Rob indicated, this is an abbreviated program. What I hope to do is familiarize you with the public ethics law and give you some idea about what to be thinking about before you take actions that could result in or be a conflict of interest. I think a brief story about myself would be helpful. As Rob indicated, before coming to the Ethics Commission, I worked for the Office of the Attorney General. And in that capacity, I didn't really think a lot about the ethics law. I think I behaved ethically, but it's not something that was on the tip of my tongue or something that I thought about on a regular basis. I thought about it once a year when I had to file a financial disclosure statement, and beyond that once a year filing, frankly, it didn't enter much into my thinking. Fortunately, I believe I avoided unethical situations and conflicts. Then I came to this position, which I've held for the last 6 months, November 2nd of 2011. I spend my entire waking day thinking about ethics. I go to work thinking about ethics. I go home, I think about ethics. I dream about ethics, and my wife tells me I talk in my sleep about ethics. So obviously I'm pretty immersed. I don't think we need to go that far with you today. But I'd like ideally to acclimate you to the notion of ethics, particularly conflicts of interest, so that you're better off than I was during my time with the Office of Attorney General, so that you think about these matters, and when situations arise, you're a little further down that ramp or up that spectrum, a little closer to where I am today, but obviously you don't have to get that far. The other thing, and I guess that's the most important thing, if you forget everything else I talked to you about, remember that second bullet. At the end, I'll put up a phone number, and as Rob indicated, there's a card out there with some contact information. We'd like you to know how to contact us, because that's what we're there for. My staff, a staff of 11 counting myself, is there to assist you, answer questions, help you work through problems that may confront you in your daily working lives. Now, as Rob indicated, the purpose of this conversation today is conflicts of interest, but I can't help but take a second to talk about financial disclosure. Did anybody in here file an annual financial disclosure statement with the Ethics Commission? Well, that's great. I should tell you that, and remind you, if you haven't filed it for this year, it's due on the 30th of April, so we're within a week. Please get it in on time. But there's a direct tie-in between financial disclosure statements and conflicts of interest. The notion behind filing a financial disclosure statement is that you put on a piece of paper, which the public has accessible for their viewing, your interests. And the notion is that the public will have greater trust if the public knows that you've disclosed interests and what would possibly be a conflict, and they know that there's nothing hidden, and you're making decisions presumably for the right reasons because you've disclosed all your interests and all your connections. We also advertise the annual financial disclosure statement as a benefit to you, although I suspect most of you wouldn't see it as such. But it's your annual opportunity to take a look at what your interests are, what you hold in terms of property, what your debts are, and determine if some of those things do present a conflict. Now, in order to get this accomplished in a short period of time, I've decided the best way to proceed is to talk about a few scenarios, hopefully some of which, well, hopefully they don't and haven't occurred to you, but in the event they do, this will give you some food for thought. The scenarios were developed from actual situations that have come to our attention in the at the Ethics Commission, and I also have picked up a few stories here and there and suggestions about things that might have arisen. So we'll work our way fairly quickly through the scenarios, and as Rob indicated, perhaps at the end, if you can stick around a little bit and have some questions, we'll take questions. Okay, first and foremost, can an official working in a university financial aid office participate in a matter related to her spouse? Well, let me give you some more context on that one. We actually had a situation like this. It was an officer, a financial aid officer, not at this university, who was asked to consider a financial aid application, whose spouse was a student and submitted the application. Question, of course, is can that financial aid officer participate and make the award of financial aid? You probably say, of course not. Well, he thought so too, and he brought the matter to the attention of his supervisor, and the supervisor said, okay, well, thanks for bringing it to my attention. Just go ahead and make your decision as you normally would, but proceed. That was the problem. He was alerted to the situation, brought it to somebody's attention, but there's no exception that says if you report it to your senior, your supervisor, you can move and go ahead. If you have a conflict, you have a conflict. And in this case, what we'd ask you to think about is the rules on participation. Section 15501 of the Public Ethics Law provides the rules regarding participation, and it's pretty clear. It says that a state employee or official may not participate in certain matters where the employee or certain relatives, spouse, parent, child, brother, or sister, have a specific interest. Well, obviously, this situation occurred in that financial aid scenario that we're talking about, and Unfortunately, the official proceeded and made the award. It was dealt with after the fact, but obviously, had he realized there's no report to your supervisor and then go ahead exception, he wouldn't have gotten into that predicament. The concept of spouse, parent, child, brother, and sister, we call that's a term we use called qualifying relative. If a qualifying relative stands to benefit from a decision that you're asked to make, then you should not participate in the matter. Keep in mind that the public ethics law really sets the minimum standards for you to conduct yourselves in performing state business. For instance, it doesn't say that if the awardee in this, going back to this scholarship award situation, if the awardee is your brother-in-law, he's not a qualifying relative, you could proceed and make the decision. If the awardee is your next-door neighbor, your best friend, your grandmother, not a qualifying relative, and under the literal interpretation of the law, you could go ahead and make the award. However, as I said, the public ethics law sets the minimum standards. You may decide that you're not comfortable, and that's part of what being familiar with the ethics law will do, hopefully, is make you uncomfortable when situations arise, and you might just decide not to participate because even though it's not a qualifying relative we're talking about, it's still a situation where you think it's better if somebody else makes the decision. One other thing about participation. Participation comes up in a lot of contexts. It comes up in the context of being part of a panel or a group that might be making a decision to award a contract, or again in this financial aid award situation where you're making the decision as a solo. But it's important when you decide not to participate that you do it with some drama. For instance, if you're part of a group that's sitting around and you're making a decision to award a contract at some level at the university, that's your job, and you say, well, wait a minute, my brother works for this business that has applied and submitted this bid on this contract. I don't want to participate. That's great. Well, we encourage you when you don't participate to do it with some flair. Don't just sit in the room while the discussion is going on about this particular contract with the other members of your panel. Don't nod your head in agreement or shake your head in disagreement as they're talking about decisions, and simply not participate by then not voting at the final outcome. We encourage you, when you don't participate, to do more than that. And we suggest leave the room, be out of the room, don't be part of any of the discussions so that you don't have any influence. No one calls your actions into question later. In fact, if you're part of a group where minutes are taken, it's always nice if in the minutes it says, John Smith left the room and did not participate in the discussion on such and such a matter. That's what we mean by don't participate, and that's really what the participation rules envision, and it's cleaner that way. Okay, can a university official participate in the hiring of his son by the university? Again, you're probably thinking that's pretty obvious, but that comes up too from time to time. It becomes a particular problem when an official is in some senior subordinate situation. The subordinate is the decision maker, and the senior either overtly or maybe a little less overtly leans on the subordinate to make a decision in favor, in this case, of a son or some other qualifying relative. Obviously, it's important to stay removed from those kind of decisions if you're the supervisor. And for instance, if you're the dean of a school and you have a certain amount of prestige associated with your position, you don't want to be anywhere near a decision where your son, your daughter, your wife is being considered for a position at the university. You want the decision to be made on its own merits, and you keep as far away from that decision as possible. So again, if you're confronted with any kind of situation like this, what you want to think about is under the participation law, Section 15501 of the Public Ethics Statute, that you can't participate because here again, if it's a qualifying relative or it's just somebody that if you want to take a step further removed and be even more distant in those kind of cases where maybe it's not absolutely required for you not to participate, it's still a good idea to avoid participation, perhaps stay out of those situations, don't interject yourself at all. There's actually another section of the law that covers this situation as well. It's called the prestige of office issue, and that's Section 15506 of the Public Ethics Law, and that says that an official or employee may not intentionally use the prestige of his or her office for his or her own private gain or that of another. So what do we mean by that? We all have a certain amount of prestige that working for the state brings us. Some of us may not realize that, but in fact, it's quite prestigious. And as that term is used in the public ethics law, it means a little more than simply the glory and the recognition that goes with your position. But one way that the term prestige of office is used is a situation like this, where you're that senior person, you're that dean, you're that high-level person, and you bring to bear the strength of your office on a decision being made at a lower level that benefits yourself, or in the case of hiring a family member, somebody else. It would be a violation of your prestige of office if you used your position, for instance, in a hiring situation. So there's two ways you can get into trouble in this type of hiring scenario. Okay, this one actually was not a situation we've dealt with, but it was suggested we might want to talk about it. Can a university official attend a lunch sponsored by a pharmaceutical company where the company will be discussing a new drug it's rolling out, when coincidentally this type of drug will be the subject of a future procurement? Well, in a situation like this, we want to think about the gift law provision in the public ethics law. That's section 15505, and it's well covered, and there's some pretty specific prohibitions in terms of accepting gifts in your capacity as a state employee. First thing is, an official or employee may not solicit or receive a gift for him or herself or others. And that solicit, I'm going to focus on for a second. Solicit is absolutely a prohibition. We're going to talk about a couple exceptions under the gift law in a minute. There's no exceptions for soliciting. Don't go asking anybody that's in a position that you could influence to give you a gift. That's absolutely barred, and there's no exceptions for that. Now, but there are certain exceptions that I'm going to talk about in terms of others offering you gifts. But first of all, subject to certain exceptions, an employee or official may not knowingly accept any gift directly or indirectly from any person that the official or employee knows or has reasons to know. And here are the people we're talking about that you can't accept from. Someone who's doing or seeking to do business with the officials/employee's agency. Someone who is engaged in activities regulated or controlled by the officials/employee's agency. Someone who has financial interests that could be substantially affected by decisions made by the employee or the official. Or finally, a lobbyist within the functional jurisdiction of the employee's agency. We call those folks, our term at the State Ethics Commission is controlled donors. Those are the donors that you have to be aware of. Those are the donors that if they're trying to give you some sort of gift, you're going to find yourself getting in hot water potentially with the public ethics law. And going back to that pharmaceutical company scenario for a second, if you take a look up there, excuse me, wrong button. It's someone doing or seeking to do business with the official/employee's agency. In all likelihood, this pharmaceutical company, maybe they're not selling something to the university hospital system now, but maybe they want to. And if they're seeking to do business, their objective in offering you some sort of gift, like lunch is considered a gift, would be a violation of the public ethics law, except, and as I said, there's a number of exceptions. One of the exceptions, again, we're talking about gifts from these controlled donors only. Gifts of nominal value, those are treated as $20 or less by the State Ethics Commission. Secondly, meals and beverages in the presence of the donor. So let's stop there for a second. Let's go back to this scenario with the pharmaceutical company inviting you to come to a luncheon where they tout this great drug that they're hoping to sell to the university. That would be an exception because you're getting meal/beverage, and you're in the presence of the donor. That's important because distinguish that from a situation where you meet with this pharmaceutical company in your office, which you can do. They can come and talk to you about their drug. Depending on your position, you might have that opportunity. And then they say at the end of the meeting, thanks for taking the time. And you know, we have a credit card on file down at Ruth's Chris. Go out to lunch on us. In fact, just tell them you're there, you want to charge it to our account, or bring your family. Go down and have a great dinner, lots of wine, and enjoy yourselves. That would be unacceptable. And the reason it would be is because it wouldn't be in the presence of the donor. If you're an event, though, which where the donor's present and providing you a meal, perfectly acceptable to take it. So with respect to this particular scenario, you would be okay. The other two exceptions, reasonable food, lodging, and travel for participation at a speaking engagement. You go to some event, some meeting, and you go speak at an engagement, and if your travel, as long as you're on the program and you're one of the speakers, your travel's covered, and as is the food and the lodging. The rules on gifts vary depending on the giver, depending on the recipient, and it's important to know them. These are the kind of things you'll probably want to call us about from time to time. Okay, can a university official attend a dinner for a subgroup of attendees at an annual IT conference? Just like the first situation. Dinner's put on by the sponsor's present, you're perfectly fine in attending and accepting the food and the beverage at the IT conference. But part two to that, can the official at that dinner also accept a gift from the company that's sponsoring the dinner that's given to each attendee valued at $100? No. You run afoul of that $20 nominal gift limitation, and so you'd have to decline to take that gift. And by the way, we don't suggest that you could say, well, I love that gift. How about if I give you $80 and I keep the $20 piece? No, decline the whole gift. And the third thing, what if the gift is a Ravens ticket? Well, depending on the kind of year they're having, it may not be worth more than $20. But actually, we say no to sporting event tickets, period. There's a flat prohibition, so don't take sporting event tickets. And of course, we all know Ravens tickets are going to be more than that $20 limit. Again, gift issue, section 15505. Can a university official attend a professional association meeting as a speaker and accept reimbursement for travel and lodging? Again, we're still talking gifts, but again, we talked about that exception for the speaker a second ago. That would apply in this case. Now, you need to be on the program. To just show up at the meeting and maybe ask some questions and maybe somehow get some very informal spot in the meeting and then say, well, yeah, I participated. No, the Ethics Commission, when looking at these types of situations, expects to see you as a part of the program. And then, by the way, don't go to a 4-day meeting, have your appearance on the first day, and then stay 3 nights and charge those 3 nights to the sponsor of the event and charge all your meals. You know, you get your travel out. If you want to stay for the whole thing, you pick up the tab after your piece is over with, and you can take the flight back at their expense. But in terms of the incidental expenses during the course of a 4-day meeting, you can't obviously accept all of those. Okay, I'm getting the sign. We're about done, and I'm going to move this really quickly here. Can a university official with a side business, for instance, selling real estate, Tupperware, etc., use the office phone to make or take calls or other office equipment to make copies or send emails related to business? Back to that prestige of office. We talked about the prestige, which we kind of look at as the importance of your office, but there's another concept that we call prestige that applies. It's the idea that you have access to state resources and state facilities in your position as a state employee. And if you go using those for your benefit or the benefit of somebody else, you've abused the prestige of your office. So don't do that. You can have a side business potentially, but you can't have it running out of your office. And the same question, which I'll skip over, it's a similar thing. Can a university employee do something similar? Student advisor who also has a business on the side in a tutoring position can't use access to the students to get them to take tutoring from her, can't get professors to refer persons to her. Obviously, that would again be an abuse of the prestige of office because it would be using that insider position. Last scenario, can a university employee who works as a researcher also work a second job with a contractor that performs research services for the university? This slide is an absolute abuse of slide protocol. There's much too much stuff there. And I'm going to skip past it and get right to the important point, which is right down here. Basically, that an employee or official may not have a financial interest or, and more importantly here, or be employed by an entity having or negotiating a contract with or is subject to the authority of the agency. Basically, we got an entity, a contractor, has a contract with the university. The question is, can you work for that contractor as a state employee? Generally, no, because you're working with somebody that's doing business directly with your agency. There's a whole body of law on outside employment that allows people to work second jobs under certain circumstances, but not when you're working on the very contract that the agency has arranged. And one other quick scenario that might help highlight this, if you were an IT person and you were working in the IT world at the university, and this contractor doing a research job for the university found out about you and asked you to work some IT work for them, that might be possible if it's disconnected with the contract. The State Ethics Commission actually has a process in place to evaluate requests for secondary employment, and submitting an application and explaining the circumstances, and the further removed you are from the actual business relationship between the contractor and your employer, the fact that you're just doing work for them may be okay. That's a case-by-case decision made by the Ethics Commission. Our website actually has a form for submission. There's one exception here. I know some of you are probably researchers thinking, well, wait a minute, in a research scenario, can I do this? And I'm not going to get into this. It's beyond the scope of my presentation and frankly, my knowledge. But the law, Section 15523, has carved out an exception for universities. It's this Public-Private Partnership Act, which basically, under rules set up by the university, there is an opportunity to work as a researcher at a university and also to work under a research contract for some outside contractor. General Assembly years ago, with the encouragement of the university system, saw the wisdom to both parties, to all sides, of having smart researchers participate in these projects that will hopefully advance the cause of whatever the research project is. So there is that one exception. It's unique to the university setting, and so I leave you with that. Basically, in closing, as Rob said, there's a card out there. Take a look at that card. Grab one if you don't have one, but it has this information on it. Again, if you forget everything else that I've just said, and it's certainly possible you may, but just remember that if something comes up where you think you need some help, give us a call. We're more than happy to talk to you. You won't be bothering us, and it'll save you and perhaps us some problems down the road. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike. As you can tell, there is a great deal of material to cover in the state ethics training, and the law has a lot of nuance and a lot of aspects to it that we're not able to go too deeply into today. But as a resource, I encourage you to look at the website and to contact Michael's office if you have any questions. Now we turn a bit on an oblique angle to the President's office. Michelle Eastman is the Assistant President and Chief of Staff, one of Wallace Lowe's closest advisors. She has a long and distinguished career experience here at the university, and among her many responsibilities, which I'm just beginning to explore as a newcomer to the university, is her monitoring role for outside professional activities of all of us and your colleagues around the campus. And so it's my pleasure to introduce to you Michelle Eastman.
Well, I don't have a PowerPoint. I don't really thought that would take me too much time in my busy job. So I am going to talk about the policy that we have for outside professional activities. It's one of the things that I didn't know would be a responsibility of mine, just to ensure. Mostly my responsibility is in beating on people to make sure they all get filled out at the university, and we have nearly 100% participation. I think we have a couple of people that we're still looking for this year, but I really appreciate all of you who filled these out because it is important. It is the one avenue of a way to disclose, and it's mandated in university policy that we have to disclose in our policy on conflict of interest and conflict of commitment. There is a separate policy. I'm not going to talk about our separate procedure. I'm not going to talk about, thank you, that has to do with conflict of interest that's research related. There is a whole different kind of process you go through that comes into the President's office, but I've been told this is going to be covered in another one of these events. So I'm really going to focus on this form that everybody has to fill out once a year. All faculty who are full-time and all exempt staff who are full-time have to fill it out. The intent of the policy is really to provide guidance to enable these extra-university relationships. We don't want to stop them. We just want to be careful about them so that you can avoid situations that could harm either you or the reputation of the university in what could be perceived or real conflicts of interest or conflicts of commitment, and that's ethical, legal, or financial. The policy is really concerned with two broad kinds of conflict. Those are conflict of interest, which typically involves some sort of potential financial gain or personal benefit either to you or a family member, which we've already heard about. And then a conflict of commitment, which typically would arise when your outside activities may compromise your ability to actually fulfill your responsibilities in your position here at the university. So those are the two. This is a report, this OPA as it's called report, replaced the semi-annual consulting reports that maybe some of you remember doing in the past. So we just have to do it once a year, though anytime something comes up where you think there might be a perceived or real conflict of interest or commitment, you should be talking to your department unit head. You shouldn't really just wait till the end of the year. You should talk it through. So who has to report? I'll repeat, all full-time faculty and exempt staff. What do you have to report? Well, it's all paid and all significant, and I'll talk about significant in a second, unpaid outside professional activities. So significant. Well, the interesting piece about this in our policy is that the definition of what's significant or not actually gets determined by the unit head. And they are to take into consideration when determining whether something is a significant outside professional activity. The duration of time that the faculty member or staff member will be spending doing this activity, the nature and degree of the professional skills involved, how close it relates to your own employment at UM, your own duties here at the university, and then the type of outside entity involved that you're doing the activity with. And then there's this definition of what's professional, okay, in the policy. So that's outside activity that relates in any way, whether it's indirectly or directly, to your responsibilities at the university, your professional responsibilities, your job responsibilities, or your area of expertise. So if you're a finance officer, that's a broad area of expertise that will be looked at when you're filling out this report. In the report, as many of you know if you filled it out, you have to put in the name of the organization or the individual with whom you're doing this activity, a description of the work performed, and it's important if you hold a position, for instance, on a board or in a company, to note that. Management responsibilities, ownership, again, looking at any kind of financial conflict that there might be, or a financial interest in this company. And then, of course, the approximate number of hours worked, and that is approximate. And I would just stress with you, when in doubt, you should just talk to your unit head, talk it through, or report it, and then it'll be looked at by the unit head in approval processes. I thought it would be interesting to just talk about a few examples of what people are actually reporting on the forms, and so I was flipping through them a couple of days ago. Since I have access now to the whole university, it's kind of fun to look through. I've never really had time to do that. And so a lot of people report none, and that's perfectly fine if that's the case. You can report none, and it takes just a second to go in and do that on the form. But here's just a few examples. So someone in applied agriculture reports that they consulted on athletic field and maintenance at the National Cathedral. So they clearly were using their professional expertise with the National Cathedral. They happened to do this on a volunteer basis. It was unpaid, but because it was their professional expertise, they reported it on the form. People report being officers of things like teachers' associations or officers of a foundation, people with financial backgrounds who are treasurer in these kinds of organizations will report it. People report staff training for a child care center if they happen to have this as an area of their expertise. Reviewing journal articles, so work that you're doing for a publisher gets put on the form. Somebody reported writing a weekly newspaper column, which I found of interest. Website managers for associations, if you're an IT person and doing that. Private consulting practices, if you happen to be in the counseling area, are reported. Volunteering at the National Arboretum, I found on some ones. Video editing for a company, again, if it's part of your responsibilities or area of expertise, you would report that. Someone actually was an officer in a family organic farm, a limited liability corporation, which I found kind of fascinating. And there's all kinds of financial things that are reported. People who do tax return preparations, people who do accounting for their churches. So it's really for you to take a look at. Some of the interesting ones were in the arts area, because a lot of people do things in the arts in this area. It's a big arts area. So people who are production managers, lighting directors for theaters around the area, piano repair. We have people who are piano technicians here. Engineers do a lot of engineering consulting for area companies, fire investigations for law firms and things like that. So generally you just have to kind of, when you're filling out the form, think about, am I doing something that actually relates either to my actual job duties here or to my area of expertise? And that should be your sort of guide. And again, anytime you have a question, I think it's really very useful to go to your unit head, and if there's a question above that, you kind of go up the chain. And a lot of people actually call my office. I never thought of myself as an expert in this, but I kind of talk through the issues with them and their unit head. So outside professional activities are generally permitted as long as there isn't a conflict of interest or conflict of commitment, or if it can be managed in some way. Again, the importance of talking to your unit head about whether or not this could be managed. There are some things not permitted, which I think you should know. You can't have a payment for consulting or professional service within the University of Maryland or to another USM institution or state agency unless you have written permission in advance by the unit head and the president of the institution. You are not to use substantial university resources without prior arrangement for reimbursing this, again, in writing. So there is a comment in the policy about you're just using sort of regular daily if you happen to use your computer for a short period of time for something. But if you're actually using substantial resources, again, something to be discussed with your unit head, you need to have that reimbursed. It's just not allowed. No faculty or staff are ever to convey UM endorsement of the results of their outside activities. So if you write a report for someone, you say, well, University of Maryland endorses this, just can't be done. This is something you're doing privately. And you can't enter into any agreement that conflicts with the university or Board of Regents policies on intellectual property, again, without written consent of the president. So if there's a conflict, the resolution of conflicts generally occur at the unit head level. If that can't happen, it goes up to the next head. So if it's a department chair, up to the dean, and then up through the usual reporting lines. So again, I guess I would just stress in this process that it's an easy form to fill out. I think the rules, if you look at the actual policy, the rules are relatively clear, and as they should be. And we don't want to discourage people to interact with the community and to use their expertise. We just want to make sure that that if there is a perceived conflict, that we resolve that at the university level. So that's it for me. Hold on.
Thank you, Michelle, for the orientation. And again, as a newcomer, it's helpful to me, so I'll fill that out with a little bit more care, perhaps, at my next opportunity. We have spent quite a bit of time thus far talking about conflict of interest, and now I'd like to shift gears and think about appropriate conduct with respect to travel and entertainment. And these, of course, involve subjective judgments, and so assuming good intent on all of our parts, we want a little bit of help understanding how to frame thinking about this. And to that end, we have Sue Nash joining us, Sue is Associate Director in the Department of Business Services and a colleague in my division, and it's a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning. So I'm going to jump right in and focus on Principle 8, as Rob said, appropriate conduct with respect to gifts, travel, and entertainment, with a real focus on the travel piece of it in the 10 minutes that I have allotted. So university faculty, administrators, and staff are expected to conduct themselves so as to ensure that their positions are not misused for private gain with respect to the undertaking of university-related travel. So I'm going to highlight some concepts about the way university staff plan and undertake business travel, which keep the travel principles in alignment with the ethical principles. First, it's true. Travel administrative staff and travelers are responsible for being familiar with university policy and procedures. You heard it here. The University Board of Regents policy and also the institutional policies are readily available as links off of the principal's website and also off of the Department of Business Services website, where travel services features the policy links and also much more extensive policy that you might need to have for travel planning. Travel Services conducts regular training at least monthly about travel policy and procedures and other more specialized topics, and they're also available during the normal business day by phone and by email for your travel planning process. This above all, the underpinning for university travel, make sure to get approval for your travel before you commit to any deliverables, to speak at a conference, to go somewhere, and certainly before you make any reservations, deposits, or buy transportation tickets with university funds. One of the most frequent reasons that a transaction is noticed and investigated for more information, you'll hear about flagging for audit, is that it wasn't approved before the traveler left, or in some other way it's inconsistent, the dates don't match. The undertakings didn't seem to be in accordance with the purpose. The destination was different. Approvers must know the rules and they must assure that they're followed. So as an approver, you need to be aware of the total scope of the reason for the trip and what the logistics are and what the costs are going to be to reasonably undertake that trip and to take it responsibly. In business travel, a trip normally encompasses transportation, lodging, and meal per diem. That's a trip. Entertainment of others, which on campus we call business hosting, is usually not permitted except where it's approved in advance for very specific job assignments. The next concept, pretty obvious, the university doesn't pay for personal services. So stated simply, keep your personal expenses absolutely separate from your business expenses. One suggestion is that when you check into a hotel, ask the hotel to set up a separate billing folio for just your room and tax, and then pay for your own personal expenses. It might be spa, might be cable, on a separate bill that the university issues, or pay as you go along. Remember that the university doesn't pay your personal expenses because you're in a travel status. We don't pay for your gym membership. We don't pay for your over-the-counter medication or your favorite TV show. And also for your personal charges when you're away from home, which might include things like babysitting, somebody driving your kids to school, not covered. Personal expenses are not reimbursable under travel. And finally, the university does not pay for unallowable expenses, including parking tickets, speeding tickets, and other violations. Probably no new news there. Also makes sense, all the principles apply while you're in a travel planning status and in a travel status as well. And I'm not going to try to enumerate all 10, but I would like to touch on respect for others. Just to recognize that respect for others starts with respect in the travel planning process for your own department travel administration staff, for the traveler themselves who's trying to accomplish their work outside of the university context, for our travel services staff, our travel agencies, airline personnel, and also hotel personnel. And I hope this is the only time I do want to reference today, the news teaches us that your conduct outside of the university has the same consequences as it will have here if it's inappropriate. And other university relevant policies and procedures also apply. Some of them are linked to the Travel Services website for convenience, fleet policy if you're using a university vehicle. I mentioned earlier business hosting, which is those very select pre-approved occasions where you might be paying for somebody's meal and or some other kind of entertainment in a very narrow fashion. I'll put a point to export control. if you're traveling out of the country, bringing university equipment or university information, or even if you're traveling within the country in certain circumstances and interacting with non-U.S. nationals. So those are complicated rules, may or may not pertain to your trip, even if you're not going abroad. And then also procurement for our friends at the procurement office, delegated authority. Make sure that you're within it if you're doing anything outside of the norm of buying your tickets and your transportation from the university travel agencies. And all relevant laws apply. And that's the laws in the places that you pass through and the places that you go to. So an example I have is, and this is not against smokers, and this didn't happen, but if you have a smoke in an airplane lavatory before the flight takes off, and you're removed from the flight, and you have to pay for a new full fare ticket, that would not be a reimbursable expense on a lot of levels. So the university doesn't reimburse anything that's a violation. Don't make a prohibited purchase using the university travel card. And prohibited purchases are outlined very distinctly. No personal services, no alcohol, no first-class airfare, no gifts for others, no gifts for yourself. And don't submit those kind of things for reimbursement, those prohibited services. Don't put it on an expense statement or an MPR or the other means the university has for seeking reimbursement. If you're not sure about a purchase or service that comes up during the course of your trip and it wasn't pre-approved on your travel approval request, either don't do it, try to seek information from your department approving authority if it's practical, shoot them an email, do a voicemail, or otherwise, just like all of the expenses that occur during your trip, undertake that expense with the same thought and care that you would if you were spending your own money. You might be, and it also is a core value for how the university undertakes travel while you're on the road. I think it's clear that if you're on sponsored travel, make sure that you know what's okay to charge before you even start making your trip plans. University doesn't pay for services that had no cost. Fine, you can stay with a colleague in their house or apartment and save your travel budget, but don't think that you'll give them $50 a day as a thank you, or a fancy dinner, or a gift from the local kiosk. Those types of things aren't reimbursable. Don't attend a conference that the university's paid for meals and then submit the meal per diem for lunch. The university doesn't pay twice and that meal's already been paid for. Don't have a coupon. We used to have, in the old days, the cereal box coupons, but if you've got a coupon for a free day rental car, don't submit it on your expense statement as what it would have cost if you had paid for that day's car rental. Only actual expenses incurred can be reimbursed. If it didn't cost anything, it didn't have a value, it's not expensible, it's not reimbursable. And the university, this seems so obvious, but the university doesn't pay for a trip that's not taken. So if you have to cancel, unbeknownst to you, give it up. Tell your supervisor immediately when you know the cancellation has to take place. Don't just not go and don't mention it. Don't pocket the ticket and think that you'll use it on your next business trip, or certainly not on your next personal trip. The university doesn't pay for services that never happened. This is one of my favorite. The university does not allow university friends and family, and this does include pets, in university vehicles. We also don't allow university folks who have nothing to do with your business trip in the university vehicle. And there's no frolic and detour. If you're on university business and your dry cleaners is on the way, even if you're going to wear that suit to work tomorrow, that's personal. And personal trips, side trips, aren't permissible in university vehicles. Similarly, when you're in a hotel room, the cost of the least expensive, reasonable, practical room is what may be expensed to the travel card or is reimbursable. So if there is someone staying in the room with you, which isn't prohibited, a spouse, a travel companion, make sure that you get good documentation about what that room would have cost as the single reasonable rate. Overall, use the least expensive services to accommodate your trip requirements. Normally, travel is reimbursed using the meal per diem and a hotel rate that's a government rate or a similar type of business rate. Be professional, reasonable, prudent, spend what's necessary, And again, make sure that you get your approval before you go. Travel in accordance with university practice, even when your business travel is reimbursed by other entities, and to the maximum extent possible, order from master contracts that are issued by procurement, use the university travel agencies, and stick with the preset policy and procedures as much as is practical for the broad array of travel that we do here at the university. Gloria asked me to talk about what not to do and how to be, so I'll close with, don't be excessive, irresponsible, or make false statements, and don't inflate costs or trip logistics or other travel services to benefit yourself personally. Your misconduct could have consequences, and they can range from anything from paying back the expense in question all the way to criminal charges, depending on the nature of the fiscal irregularity. Thank you.
Wow. So just an addendum to Sue, because I think it's really important that for you to be successful in undertaking business, travel, and entertainment, that you remember that we want to travel when it's appropriate to travel. And we shouldn't be fearful of doing so. We have so many regulations that are in place to protect you and to protect the university and the state, and they're appropriate. And I would encourage you, especially for those travelers who are not frequent travelers and are not as familiar on a routine basis with these regulations, reach out and ask. And that's something of a theme that you've seen and heard from each of the first three speakers, and that is what we're talking about here can be complex stuff, and there's a lot of it. And so when in doubt, take a deep breath and raise your hand and ask. But again, we're assuming good intent on your part, and that is part and parcel of a principle and value that's worthy of being included in the list of our principles of ethical and responsible conduct. So we're on your team as opposed to working against you, trying to help you make the right kinds of choices. Now we're going to completely shift gears. And over to my left, your right, is Dave Mosca. Dave is the Director of Internal Audit for the University System of Maryland. And Dave will offer some thoughts on auditing in our university system, on the characteristics of organizations that he audits that cause him to be concerned, and some hints about what might trigger a special kind of audit outside of the normal regular audits. And then we'll wrap and have some opportunity for questions for all of us. So Dave, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning. You got enough energy left to listen to an auditor? I'm just curious before we get started, is there anybody here that's found themselves in a situation where they may have an inappropriate conflict of interest? That's auditor humor, so it's kind of mean. Huh? One guy raised his hand, so we'll have a discussion after we're done here. A couple things I'd like to talk about today. One, as Rob introduced, what might trigger an audit in context of a conflict of interest. Also, my views are mostly after the fact as to there has been an inappropriate conflict of interest. And I hope to give you an idea of what happens when somebody gets caught or finds themselves in a situation where they may have not intended to, but found themselves in a situation of an inappropriate conflict of interest. So what may trigger an internal audit in the context of a conflict of interest? The most common is through what we'd call our whistleblower hotline. And we have cards out there that you can pick up. And if you like, take 100 and pass them out. That'd be fine. We'll keep buying more from Sue Kernan, who put them together for us. Right, University Printing Service. No, and she did not take the lunch I offered to get a better rate. That's the most common. The next most common is a referral from management. Somebody like Rob may give me a call one day and say, "Hey, Dave, I think we got a problem here, and can you help us look and see what we have?" The next most common is through a routine internal audit. We don't uncover too many during these where our objective isn't necessarily focused on finding a fraud or a conflict of interest, but improving the process to prevent and detect the possibility of something like that happening. What happens when you're associated with a conflict of interest and you are in a situation where you have to answer questions either to your supervisor or myself or somebody from law enforcement? It's been my experience that that situation for the individual is the most stressful I've ever seen any individual in an organization. You have feelings of fear, anger, depression, paranoia. These are horrible feelings, and you can just see the person change over a very short period of time. You've seen the presidents who, after 4 years before and after, what they look like. In the matter of a couple weeks, we see people look like that. It's awful feelings. And it's not limited to the individuals either. If there's a situation where this is being investigated, what's the first question people ask? Where was the supervisor? And your supervisor's in a situation where they have to defend themselves in their department. How could you allow this to happen? Fair or not, that can occur. Your coworkers feel it. Nobody wants to be in a department where somebody gives you a call and says, "What the heck is going on over there? You know, how big a deal is this? Is it just this person?" And those people, you want to feel good about your department. You don't want to have to defend your department against negative rumors, discussions. You know, when things get out, it spreads across organizations. Everybody knows about it. We are a state agency. Ultimately, we're state employees. That garners more attention. If you're in the private industry, oftentimes they'll say, "We don't want to deal with the publicity. We don't want to deal with pressing charges. We want that person out of here." We want the same thing, but being a state agency, we're not always afforded that. We are obligated to report issues to the Office of the Attorney General if we think there's an inappropriate situation. The press may get a hold of it. You can find your name in the paper. If you're a family member and somebody in your family who is one of the primary breadwinners, sometimes you have kids, mortgages. I have never come across anybody in my professional career that after the fact, well, it was worth the risk. The downside is it's truly horrific, and it affects me and my auditors too. We don't like to see this. We see a person who's made a horrible decision and they have to pay, but it goes beyond that. It goes to their families, it goes to their coworkers, their supervisors. I'll share one or two experiences that are specific. They're not UMCP, and they were a long time ago, so I think it's fair to talk about it now. A while back, a couple officers at the cabinet level at another institution. I need to speak up? Okay, I'll do my best. A couple people at the cabinet level wanted some work done on their houses. They didn't want a special deal, but they weren't sure who they should contact to get the work done. So they asked the person in charge of facilities, do you know anybody who can do this type of work to do this home improvement? And they made a recommendation. The individuals contacted the contractor and asked them to do, a few $1,000s worth of work on their homes. They disclosed it. They weren't trying to hide anything. They were motivated to get some work done on their house. I'll put you on the spot, Mike. I apologize. Is that okay?
Go right ahead.
What? Is that okay in that situation? If I'm an officer and
That may be a prestige of office problem.
I would think so. This contractor was doing several $1 million a year in business with that institution. I don't know if it's a situation you wouldn't be able to recover from, certainly, and it seems like an issue that could be resolved. Would you say if somebody came forward and said, hey, I did something and I regret it now, but I want to get things right.
Well,
Folks can recover.
Yeah, they can recover.
People can recover. Well, unfortunately, 2 or 3 years later, it was found that this contractor completely renovated the facility manager's house for free. This opened up a very large investigation. It wasn't limited to the house. It was a lot of other things. So when I say, what's the first question people ask? Well, where were the supervisors? And the supervisors were horrified. They were in a situation where they did business with this contractor. By all accounts, appears legitimate. 2 minutes, I'll wrap it up. It doesn't have a happy ending. I'll get to that point right now. It was still something I thought the officers could recover from, but they found that it was such an unbearable situation where they were questioned. Folks like my investigators came in, the Attorney General's Criminal Division investigators came in, and they were asking them, what happened? Why were you doing this with this contractor? And they're collecting facts and so forth. But it became so unbearable for them that they resigned. A bad ending for those folks, and by all accounts, I knew them. I respected them, and was sorry to see them go through that. On the other end of the spectrum, the facilities manager who had all this work done on his house for free, he was managing this contractor who was doing work at the university. He went to prison. I think he got a 4-year sentence. He served 2.5. Think about that in your life. It's easy to see at a distance, at an arm's length, well, they should have gone. When it becomes your family member, a coworker, it's just a horrible feeling and a horrible reflection on your coworkers, your supervisors, and your university. I mean, the presidents get asked questions, what the heck is going on with this operation? So I hope I've emphasized the downside to what can happen. You can go to prison for these things. You could lose your job for these things. You can destroy your families with these things. So there's hopefully instilling some healthy fear, some healthy tension. And I'd be happy to answer any questions either in the next 15 minutes or out in the hallway if you'd like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. So you've heard from each of our four speakers different perspectives on these issues. I'll try to lift our spirits just a little bit. The world continues to spin on its axis. Everything is fine. But I do want to before we take questions, I would like to ask you to join me in a round of applause of thanks for our speakers. And we have a few moments, and I would be delighted to have us think about issues that you're concerned about. If anyone would like to come up, we have a microphone in the front. Please step up. Just give your name and affiliation so we know what part.
My name is John Gray. I work in construction here on campus as an engineer. And I have two questions directed at you, Mike Lord, please. The one when you're talking about the gifts situation under $20. We have situations where contractors or consultants would like to come in and meet with a group, 20, 30 people, explain the product, explain their services, and we've called lunch and learn. We found it very successful. This is something we're no longer allowed to have because it's perceived as a conflict of interest. Is this something that we're allowed to have?
Yeah, under the gift law provision, food and beverage, meals in the presence of the donor.
Yes, definitely in presence.
So the donor's with you,
yes.
And providing you information. There's no intention to cut off flow of information. So as long as they're with you and they're sponsoring a luncheon that you're attending and they're present, that's fine. And there's not a $20 limit. I mean, there's no dollar limit to that. Obviously, it might start looking bad if they ply you with a lot of wine and other stuff.
No, this is like $10 lunch.
Yeah. That's again in the presence of the donor. You're fine.
Okay. Another one was a scenario, and I'd like to see how I could approach this differently. At the first ethics, we had the diversity doctor. I can't remember her name, but she talked about people like hiring something similar like themselves. When you put up in the slide earlier on about family members and that being a no-no, well, in this scenario, let me call the people that were similar to themselves family members. Again, I'm an engineer. About 25 years ago, one of the family members brought in another family member to get this job, and big job, and head of construction. He goes in, he takes his resume and paper, gives it to the secretary, she types it up, turns around, he gets the job. Fine. About 12 years after that, this is maybe 12 years ago, this guy brings along another one of his family members and gives him this job. Had some problems with him, worked for a year or two, got away from him, and it turned out I was required to go work for the guy again. His job was university engineer. You're not allowed to call yourself or portray yourself in accordance with professional engineers, and I've checked with them at the Professional Engineers Society of Maryland. You're not allowed to project yourself as such when you're not actually one. You haven't passed the exam and such and such. Made all this information, protested as much as I could. Basically, I got threatened with my job a couple of times. This individual comes on we have a probationary time when somebody can get rid of at any particular time. He goes out and he hires an electrician. He works on his gated community house up in Maryland. He goes out and hires an HVAC helper who goes up and works on his place while I was on probation up in Maryland. He has other people hiring engineers, and he's taking people that are on probation, putting them on the hiring committee. This sort of thing went on and on and on until about 8.5 years ago when we had a gentleman, Kurt Tosh, he was in the electrical department, or electrician. He died on a fire in the physics building. It was a horrific accident. It was over Halloween. It was a big new thing on the campus at the time. What did we do? We formed a committee. The committee goes out, everybody knows something's going to happen. Finally, this guy had been looking for a job after a year. He goes off and takes off on what he's supposed to be leaving the university. Some of us don't believe he's leaving the university because his office is never filled. Sure enough, a year later, he gets a job somehow back on campus. He pops up like Dawn of the Dead. Then shortly after that, he's in charge of the electrical shop where the guy died, and he put there. No matter what we do, we say, hey, this person's not allowed, and all that. All you do is you're allowed to be terminated on the spot on this job. So that's what you get threatened with. Finally, this person a couple of months ago got a conflict of interest, was hiring somebody. He snuck. You have the first round of committee goes around. He put a resume in that he promised this job to, and that finally got him off. Where they said, this is illegal. But my question to you is, when you're seeing something perceived, I believe it's unethical from the way you made your presentation. Is it the website? How do we approach it? What can we do in the future when you're finding conflicts of interest or people basically treating family members, hiring friends? What do we do to help you do your job better?
Well, you just described a disaster to me, but what you do is there's actually, in the public ethics law, there's a formal complaint process, and there's actually a formal way. It's got to be under oath and so forth. However, there's also another way to bring it to our attention. We have an enforcement officer, staff attorney, who does enforcement for us. That person takes calls like this regularly. As long as there's information to back it up, he'll do an inquiry into the facts as you've described them. He'll get direction from our commission. The commission is I should have said, is a 5-person appointed by the governor group of people that ultimately makes decisions. We just implement the day-to-day affairs. But you could call him. His name's Will Calhoun. The phone number that's on that card works for Will. You can get him. And then ultimately, although the ultimate complaint is supposed to be under oath, the commission has the authority to put together and take complaints that it submits to it itself, if you will, from other information. So Will's investigation would go to the commission, and if there was facts to support it, they would proceed with the complaint without you having had submitted it under oath after his investigation is complete.
Thank you.
Okay, and one point with our enforcement process, Will's actually a guy we'd like to put out of business. So if, we got enough other work in the advice arena, but if everybody does everything right, we won't have to do enforcement. So get to us in the front end before this kind of disaster occurs, and hopefully we can help you out.
It occurred to me that a number of times during the conversation we talked about certain modest gifts being acceptable if the donor is present, and that there are financial limitations. And so it just occurred to me sitting here earlier that just because the donor offers to fly to Vegas with you doesn't make it ethically acceptable to take the gift. So just something to think about. We're a little short on time, but we have another minute, maybe one more question. Does anyone else have a question or a comment they'd like to offer? Sure.
Hi there. I'm John McKee. I'm a development officer here for the university. So we obviously use the travel cards a lot. And my question is, from time to time, a donor to the university, and I use that word not in the same way that you're using donor like a contractor, but a cash donor to the university, will extend something to one of us, like either overnight lodging in their own house or something else that costs them nothing. It's an incidental expense, but in some people's view, it might be quite a big benefit that could have a value placed on it. Is that something that we should be careful to disclose or get clearance of, or at least sort of cover ourselves for?
So I just want to clarify to make sure I know the focus of your question, because there are a couple of interpretations. They're not looking for a deduction on having put you up.
No.
Basically, you're wondering if staying in a rich person's palatial mansion at their expense while you're talking to them about an opportunity to do something on behalf of the university represents a gift to you that would be something more than a nominal gift. Is that?
Throw in some nice dinners out and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So quite a lot of expense made, but on the donor's own dime, not seeking anything in return from the university, just kind of extending
Their gratitude.
I think I won't speak for my colleagues, and if any of you want to jump up here and rescue me, that would be just fine. But I suspect that disclosing to your supervisor and making clear the extent to which that relationship exists is the right thing to do, and then subjective judgments can be made based on that. But that disclosure helps you, doesn't alleviate your responsibilities, but it helps you have some additional perspective as to what you want to do from there. Any other thoughts?
So when you think about the public ethics law, think controlled donor, and you'd have to ask yourself if this person fits into any of those categories, doing business or seeking to do business, a lobbyist, somebody for whom a decision you might make may be beneficial, so the question really is this person looking for, if this person's a big contractor who wants to donate but sees down the road a generous gift being somehow reciprocated with a contract, big construction contract, I suppose there's a connection. I don't want to cloud this up too much for you, but always ask yourself if this person fits into that controlled donor category, if he's just somebody that you're looking to make a no strings attached donation to the university. And again, if you have circumstances like this and you think, gee, maybe there is a catch to this, call us and we can talk you through it, or take it to our commission for a final decision if it's not something that we feel is within our ability to answer.
Well, you have been a patient and fabulous audience this morning, and I want to express my appreciation to you. Also, the folks who helped us organize this deserve our recognition and appreciation as well. Gloria Aparicio Blackwell here. Laura Anderson Wright, if you'd stand. And I think Kim Colbert is here, but I'm not sure if I saw Kim. Kim? Oh, Kim's outside. And Cynthia Tucker, who also assisted. There's lots more that we can say. There's Kim. So thank you, Kim. There's lots more that needs to be said about these topics, but not for this hour. We have plans to continue conversations about the principles as we go forward. Two more will be introduced in a format something like this, unless we even get more creative and come up with a new format in June. And you'll be hearing more about that. But for now, we're adjourned. And again, thank you so much. Oops.
Because, of course, it's less than $20 gift. We have a little gift for our presenters, and I guarantee it's with the law. Within the law. Sure, that was the gift.
These are our famous ceramic terrapins. Thank you all.